Vertigo, the Dirty Harry movies, the Disney Pixar Inside Out films, Monk, Futurama, and my personal favorite sci-fi series, Star Trek. Hello, I'm ME from ME and History. Though these pieces of pop culture lore are vastly different, they all have one thing that links them together. Can you guess what it is, my viewers? If you guessed that the Golden Gate Bridge makes an appearance, or the plural in some cases, you've hit the nail on the head. Since its completion in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge has become a must-see landmark, be you a tourist, a born and raised Californian, or even a San Francisco resident. It has withstood millions of vehicles and pedestrians, dense fog, strong winds, and even the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. It has been an inspiration for artists, architects, photographers, and, yes, filmmakers and TV producers. Now, without further ado, let's go back in time to San Francisco. And be careful not to leave your heart behind while you're at it. The origins of the Golden Gate Bridge were shaped during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Since the gold rush in 1848 to 1849, the only way to quickly get from San Francisco to Marin was a 20-minute ride via ferry. Over the course of the next few decades, San Francisco's population swelled. In addition, the rise of the automobile and the excursions people took in them made for lengthy ferry traffic. For those of you who've sat through rush hour traffic day in and day out, you can imagine how frustrated everyone got. As the city grew, it became really obvious that a more efficient way was needed to get to and from San Francisco. But for a long time, people thought the job wasn't rational, let alone possible. The bridge would be an impediment to shipping and would jeopardize the ferry business. It could be a vulnerable target in an enemy attack. It could rob the Bay Area of its natural beauty. The unpredictable weather conditions were hardly suitable for a bridge of any kind. And given that the 1906 San Francisco earthquake was still fresh in everyone's memory, there was always the looming possibility for a bridge to collapse from a big bout of plate tectonics. In spite of the doubts, a former engineering student named James Wilkins proposed an idea for a bridge in a 1916 article of the San Francisco Bulletin. It was estimated that the cost for such a project would be a grand total of $100 million, or roughly $2.9 billion today. In 1919, San Francisco's chief engineer, Michael O'Shaughnessy, asked if the bridge could be built for a fraction of that sum, but no one stepped forward. That is, until an ambitious engineer named Joseph Strauss entered the picture. Having built successful bridges in the past, Strauss was confident that he could do the job, and for less than the estimated $100 million price tag, about $25 to $30 million. In June of 1921, Strauss submitted his plans. Originally, the bridge he designed was made up of two cantilever bridges with a middle section to connect them. But one of Strauss's colleagues, Leon Moisseiff, scrapped this design in favor of a suspension bridge. Unlike cantilever bridges, suspension bridges are held up by cables strung across the gap between their towers. This trait makes suspension bridges able to shift heavier loads and, more importantly, last during strong winds. Along with the greater amount of stability they provide, suspension bridges are also more aesthetically pleasing than their cantilever counterparts. In addition to the graceful curve of their cables, the towers of a suspension bridge can be molded to fit the artistic styles of the time. In the case of the Golden Gate Bridge, that style was known as Art Deco. But no matter how safe or eye-catching the bridge looked on paper, the residents of San Francisco still had their doubts. So, like Gustav Eiffel did for his now famous tower, Strauss went on to explain that the pros of the bridge outweighed the cons. Our world of today revolves around things which at one time couldn't be done because they were supposedly beyond the limits of human endeavor. Don't be afraid to dream. When Strauss was able to get the necessary support, however, the timing couldn't have been worse, thanks to the Great Depression. Because of the seriousness of this financial crisis, the people's doubts only increased. Would it be possible to get the necessary funds for the project? Crazy as it sounds, yes. Thanks to Strauss's convincing personality and the right connections, enough credit was acquired by bonds as well as via hefty donations from the wealthier members of California's government. In January 1933, construction of the Golden Gate Bridge started, and with it, several challenges. The north tower of the bridge, which was built on somewhat dry land, was relatively easy. The south tower, though, well, that's another story. The south tower was to be located 1,100 feet offshore in deep, choppy water. To get the materials to the tower's location, a trestle was built. 2 times that trestle was destroyed, once during a very bad storm, and once when a steamer accidentally rammed into it during a bout of heavy fog. Along with the trestle came the problem of how to support the South Tower in very deep water. Because divers couldn't go down that deep to do the necessary excavations for long periods of time, bombs were dropped underwater instead. This created a caisson for tons of concrete to be poured in. To protect the site from the rough current, a seawall called a fender was built, and workers operated it in 20-minute shifts so they wouldn't get too wet from the tides. Speaking of the workers, it's important to discuss the challenges they faced while on the job. Although the pay was nothing to sneeze at during this turbulent time period, $11 a day, the task was still a dangerous one. As the steel pieces arrived from the East Coast, thanks to the Panama Canal, and the rivets were fastened together, workers developed what was called Golden Gate disease. The symptoms were disorientation, unstable walking, and even the loss of hair and teeth. The cause? The inhalation of vapors that were created when the rivets came into contact with the primer paint. To solve this problem, respirators were used. Along with the respirators, Strauss made sure that other precautions were taken to further ensure the safety of the workers. Hard hats and safety goggles were required on site, and special creams were lathered onto the workers to protect them against the Golden Gate Strait's unpredictable weather. To further put the workers at ease, a safety net was stretched out beneath the bridge. 19 men who fell on site survived because of this net and became members of what was known as the Halfway to Hell Club. Once the towers were completed in 1935, over 80,000 miles of steel wire were forged and shipped to handle the next task, assembling the bridge's 7,650-foot cables. Though they are 3 feet in diameter, the cables are actually made up of 27,572 slim wires that were tied together in 61 bundles before being bound up into a single sturdy bundle and coated heavily in primer to protect it from the elements. This seemingly Herculean task was completed in an astonishing 191 days. Cables now in place, attention was turned to the suspended roadway. The solution to making that part of the bridge a reality wasn't too difficult. Simply extend the roadway out from each tower symmetrically. As the roadway was built, the vertical suspension ropes that would hold the structure together were put into place about 16 feet apart from each other. Bit by bit, the two sides of the bridge were built and were joined together. But though the building of the bridge was complete, there was still one very important question on everyone's minds. What color should the bridge be? At first, some people wanted it painted black. Still others wanted it done in gray. And the War Department wanted it done in black and yellow stripes. Ultimately, however, the answer to the question came from an unlikely source: the primer paint. As the bridge was constructed, people noticed how the reddish-orange color of the primer blended beautifully with the Golden Gate Strait. Irving Morrow, the same engineer who came up with the bridge's Art Deco towers, decided on the color that is still used to coat the bridge to this day: International Orange, or Orange Vermilion in technical terms. On May 27, 1937, just a little over 4 years after construction began, the Golden Gate Bridge was open to the public. This bridge needs neither praise, nor eulogy, nor encomium. It speaks for itself, Strauss said in his speech on opening day. Over 200,000 people crossed the bridge, but not in cars. Instead, they walked, tap danced, and even roller skated over it. And on May 28th at 12 noon, the first vehicles crossed the bridge. Over the course of the next week, a huge celebration known as the Fiesta followed the opening ceremony. His crowning achievement now complete, Strauss wrote a poem titled "The Mighty Task is Done." Because of how long the poem is, I've included a link to it in the description below. However, I don't want to leave you hanging, so I'll say a few of its lines. High overhead its lights shall gleam, far, far below life's restless stream, unceasingly shall flow. For this was spun its lithe fine form, to fear not war, nor time, nor storm, for fate had meant it so. These lines, which make up the last verse of the poem, still ring true today. Over the course of the following decades, the Golden Gate Bridge has seen and undergone much, from protests to earthquakes. And each time it has continued to stand tall and, excuse the Star Trek quote, live long and prosper. So next time you have your doubts over accomplishing a mighty task of your own, remember, what may seem impossible is really not so, provided that you look at things from another angle and rise to the occasion. I'm ME from ME and History and YouTube.